Hey there folks, the mediocre painter again, and I've been painting miniatures for some 30 odd years, and I'm doing videos to try and get the beginner into the wargaming hobby because I've made the mistakes. So you don't have to. So today, me and Jack, that's Jack Draco by the way, are going to talk about basing. Yes, we're following a 4-step process to paint our miniatures, and that is prime, base coat, wash, technical details, and the basing is kind of part of that technical detail step. It's a bit of a cheat really, though it really is a 5th step, or step 4.5. So today I'm going to teach you about a very simple basing technique that you can use to basically get your miniatures with a half decent base quickly. So for this you're going to need a little tray, preferably a little tray full of sand, or you can use baking powder. Sand, I prefer sand. I don't know why, but I do. But a lot of people like baking powder because it's finer and it's more in scale with the model. I'm just looking for something that shows I've made an effort. So this is a very simple way of doing it. So go to your beach, get a little bit of sand. This pot was full at 20 years ago. As you can see, there's a little bit left. I've probably painted 2,000 miniatures using this technique or something like that. So you've got your miniature, he's all ready now for basing. You've basically done the details, you're pretty happy with him, you're ready for this final step. You're going to need to get yourself a decent sized brush, something a little bit bigger than the 000 that we've predominantly been using so far. And what you're going to do is do something naughty. You're going to break the rules here. You're going to take some paint, put it in front of you, and take your brush, put it in the pot, and then put that paint that's on your brush on the base. This is a bit naughty. This is not something I normally would recommend because you're supposed to thin your paint, etc, etc. But here we actually need the paint to be thick because we're going to use it to bond the sand to the base. I know a lot of people out there will recommend using AC glue, like a super glue, and then basically use like a toothpick to basically push it around. The problem I find with that is it's really messy. You get your finger stuck to it, you get bits stuck to it, you damage the model, that kind of thing. Whereas using this method, it bonds really good, and the worst case scenario is you accidentally paint a bit of the boot or something like that on the model that you can easily touch up at a later date. So take some paint, put it on that base, and then just paint the base. It's fairly simple. And like I say, you want it to be, you know, fairly thick because you want it to basically grab hold of the sand or the baking powder, whatever it is you're using. You can, of course, buy flock as well, and I'll show you later on, you know, why flock people do that, because flock does give you a better effect. We'll show you that later on. So I've done that now. Obviously, if we're painting our series of orcs here, I want to do that on each of the bases, but before the paint dries, stick it into your little tray of sand and shuffle it around, and then tap off the excess. And you should have now a reasonably painted miniature. Now just run your finger along the edges of the base just to take off the sand. Now that's that one done. You then move on to your next one in your squad. You do them all the way along. Let's say you've got 10 in a squad, you've got those 10 done. By the time you come back to this first one, it's probably dry. So then you move on to the next step. So the next step is basically where you've got to choose what you're going to actually paint that base as. So I've got a number of examples here where I've used this technique to basically base miniatures. So you can see we've got some Imperial Guard here with like a traditional sort of green coating over the top of that sand that I've used, and then I've highlighted back up with a little yellow. We then have this Inquisitor kill team that I've been putting together, which is basically a white with like a black wash on it. You can see that looks pretty cool. And then we've got these orcs that I've been working on, which I've basically been using a wood brown and then highlighting. So then washing, I think, with a armor wash, like a dark black, not quite so dark a black. And there's lots of other ways that you can do if you use you can get really nice snow effects if you use baking powder and use like a silver wash with it. I've got an example of that for you here. So there you can use the same kind of technique with the baking powder. You can see it's a finer result, and it's not quite as coarse as the sand. So effectively you've got to let it dry, and then you're going to paint over the top. So here's an example here. So basically all I've done is basically painted over the top, and then you let that dry, and then you do a wash on top of it. It's not complicated. You can then decide if you want to bring that back up again, perhaps with a dry brush and a highlight. But the important thing to remember is when you do paint that base, you will notice that there will be a little bit of sand, possibly on top of the boot, or just around the edges of the boot and things like that. And maybe even on a bit on the leg on the model and things like that. That happens, right? So take a dry brush, not a dry brush as in dry brush technique, but a dry brush, and just knock that sand off the feet before you decide to actually paint the base. So again, paint that base on that first model, then do a cross on all your 10. Because you are loading up the brush when you do this, you are applying the paint pretty thickly. It's a good idea to clean that brush out between minis so that there isn't any paint drying actually on the brush as you go along. So that's it. It's not complicated, it's quite a simple way to do it, and if you want to actually use a bit more specialist materials, then you can get a better result. So here's some necrons, for example, where actually flock has been used. And so you get basically a bit more of a realistic result if you use flock, but of course flock's going to cost you some money. You're going to have to go to a modelling shop and buy a bunch of flock, or buy it on eBay, etc. Whereas, sand, baking powder, well, sand's effectively free if you can go to the beach, and baking powder is very cheap also. But you can still get pretty good results with the sand and the baking powder. If you want to really go to town, then you can start to basically look out there for things like hero bases, where you actually buy the bases, or if you bought Shadespire miniatures, for example, they actually come with a really cool base that's all integrated as part of the miniature, which is really nice, I think. Or you could really go to town, like these miniatures here. These are Adeptus Seriatis, where some, I bought on eBay, and somebody's actually really gone to town on these bases. Probably spent more time on the base actually than they did on the models. And obviously they've basically glued on their little rocks and things like that, and these sort of like little grasses and things which you can all get to basically model bases with. This all adds to the expense, of course, so it's really up to you whether you want to be spending that kind of money on what are rank and file miniatures and things like that, but it's entirely up to you. But that's just my simple basing method. So you're done. You should now have your 10 squad of orcs all completed. You can pat yourself on the back and say job well done, and move on to the other 100 and odd that you probably got stashed away unpainted that you've still got to do. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please like, subscribe. I will be doing more. That's all for now. Thanks.